Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Roundup. I'm your host, Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Glad y'all are joining me this afternoon. Alongside me is Gabe Henderson. Fantasy playoffs getting ready to start. Gabe, you excited?
Yeah, really excited for all the leagues I made it in. Others I'm disappointed in. You know, my main league got knocked out this week, so not too thrilled about that. But we persevere. We're going to march on, and yeah, I'm excited.
For sure, man. Yeah, I couldn't make it in every league. They had a few leagues for me that unfortunately ended in heartbreak. I didn't have any stinker leagues this year. Even the leagues where I didn't make it, it all came down to last night, and unfortunately didn't have it all go my way. Thanks Jordan Love. Y'all could have carried me to a few of those, but can't win them all. Made it in enough to where hopefully I'll win at least 4 or 5 league titles this year. So overall, can't complain.
Yeah, exactly. I needed some miracle things to happen last night, and one of those miracle things happened, so I'm in good spirits, all things considered.
For sure, for sure. And make sure anyone watching, make sure to drop your Monday Night Miracles if you have them here in the comments, or if you're just cruising like our guy Hank Trill, Latino Heat, he just cruising in the listener league playoffs there. Got the bye week, so if you want to gloat about having a bye week this week, do that as well. And if you're also needing help, questions, trade questions. Some of the leagues still have trades open. Most leagues it's closed, but for those, I know a lot of y'all have start sit questions still. So make sure to get those in here in the comments. So before we get to our headlines, our show is brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook, like it is each and every week. Make sure to head on over to Caesars for that risk-free first bet if you haven't done so already. So let's get to our headlines here. And the headline to me is this Justin Herbert deal. Justin Herbert had been having a very strong season, but past few weeks have been kind of tailing off. Chargers as a team had been falling off, and now he's out for the year. Broken finger, going to have to undergo surgery. So tough break there for Herb. He's done. His streak of starts, he had been an Iron Man throughout his career, but his starting streak is going to come to an end. But luckily for him and the Chargers, doesn't really matter. They were out of the race anyway. But sucks for us fantasy owners, being that a lot of people had Herbert on teams that were in the playoffs. But we'll have to get backup plans in place, and we'll have a segment on that here coming up. What to do if you're in a quarterback predicament, because Herbert wasn't the only QB to go down. Quarterbacks have been going down left and right, and C.J. Stroud joins Herbert on the list of really good quarterbacks getting injured. Stroud had been amazing this year, the rookie of the year. Clearly, it's not even close, but he suffered a concussion and had a season worst game against the New York Jets. So I'll have to keep an eye on his status for this week, as well as his top receiver, Nico Collins, who suffered a calf injury and had to leave that one early. Texans just couldn't get anything right. As I'm sure Gabe knows, that was a rough one there. Justin Jefferson, questionable with a chest. They got hit hard there. Josh Dobbs set him up for that, unfortunately. And now Josh Dobbs has lost his job. Could have included that in the headlines, too, although that was announced just within the last few minutes. Nick Mullins will be the Vikings starting quarterback moving forward. As for Jefferson, he is questionable. So hopefully he can come back, because for those that have survived with Justin Jefferson being hurt and then having him get hurt again, then your team must be pretty damn good. So if you could have a healthy Jefferson, that would probably mean some championships coming your way. Josh Jacobs and Keenan Allen, quick turnaround for them, both banged up, questionable for Thursday Night Football. Good thing with that is that we'll know by Thursday if they're playing or not. And so we'll have to wait and see on that, though. And so I guess before we get to the quarterbacks, well, Stroud's part of this. Stroud concussed, Herbert to IR, and we'll just start off with Stroud. If you have C.J. Stroud, would you feel comfortable starting him this week?
Absolutely not, because I don't think he actually starts. There have only been a handful of players, not just quarterbacks, but players in general, who have cleared concussion protocol in less than a week. And he needs to do that in order to start. I think the Texans will go to Davis Mills unless C.J. Stroud makes a miraculous comeback.
I got you. I guess with Derek Carr, that was the exception, not the norm. And that was like his second concussion, which makes starting Derek Carr seem even crazier. Saints lucky they won, because if they hadn't won, they would have faced all kind of backlash for starting Derek Carr in that spot. So yeah, CJ Stroud being a rookie, I mean, that's the franchise there. I don't think they're going to want to risk that. But with the concussion protocols, it's one of those things. He's got a clear protocol to even be in the discussion to start. And so it'll be interesting to see. Who did the Texans get this week?
They have the Titans in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, the Titans. Yeah, I was thinking that could be a shootout to have one of the quarterbacks in that matchup on my waiver wire recommendations. So Davis Mills, though, if he gets to start, how would that affect the offense? Do you think he could still have him be effective, or is it just just going to be a clown show if he's the starter?
It's going to be interesting to see. You know, a lot of Texans beat reporters said going into training camp that being around these other veterans in Case Keenum and CJ Stroud, the rookie, has really helped Davis Mills. They said he looked good in training camp. I mean, he's a guy that we saw. He could sling the rock last season. Last game against the Colts, we saw it. But we really haven't seen much of him. He's thrown a handful of passes here and there when CJ Stroud takes a big hit and comes back in. But, you know, he really didn't do anything too encouraging on Sunday. But once again, who did? The Texans are down so many weapons. It really just depends. You know, I think if Davis Mills is the starter, Nico Collins, I don't think even if he plays, he'll make many downfield plays. I think it's going to be a bunch of quick passes, screens, and I think they're going to try and lean heavily on their running game.
I hear you. Yeah, so probably won't really be worth streaming Davis Mills there in that matchup, because, man, it's just with all these quarterbacks going down. I mean, Justin Herbert now done for the season. It's like, what do you do if you have these guys? Because if you have a second QB, I mean, a lot of people, like, for example, in the league I had Herbert, my second QB was Geno Smith, and now he's banged up. And some people had Joshua. Actually, that was the other league, Joshua Dobbs. I had 2 leagues with Herbert. My backups were freaking Joshua Dobbs and Geno Smith. So it's like, what do you do in that spot? One of them, somebody had dropped Sam Howell because he was on bye. And so I was able to beat the waivers and add Sam Howell. What I had to do, I had to sacrifice Jaden Reed. I didn't really want to cut Jaden Reed. I mean, he's been balling at a great game last night, but I had to do it because I was like, I got to get Sam Howell on this team. I have literally no starting quarterbacks left. So I kind of finessed that and got Howell since he was on the bye. But if you weren't lucky like that, though, I mean, it's tough to know what to do. And even if you have these quote-unquote sure things like a Patrick Mahomes or like a Josh Allen, I mean, they didn't do worth a damn last week. I mean, Mahomes throwing his helmet, having a hissy fit on the sideline. I mean, it's like, I don't know what's going on in the NFL, but we were all thinking, oh, this is a quarterback-driven league, which, I mean, it still is at the end of the day. But it's like, for fantasy, though, these quarterbacks aren't really putting up the numbers. I mean, Dak and Brock Purdy, got to tip your hat to them. But outside of them, there's really nobody else. I mean, even Jalen Hurts, like these guys that we all assumed were just elite options, must start, just hadn't really been handling business. So it's just interesting to address the quarterback. And it's an interesting question as far as how should the quarterback position be addressed heading into the fantasy playoffs. I would say if you have guys in that tier that you know are capable of putting up superstar numbers, I would say you got to just keep riding with them. But if they have tough matchups, it's like, man, it's not as obvious as it used to be, I don't feel like.
Yeah, here's the wonderful thing, Spencer. No matter how many quarterbacks get hurt in the NFL, it could be all 32 for as far as everyone else is concerned. The thing is, there's going to be 32 starting quarterbacks the next week in the NFL. So, you know, if you're in a position like, if someone's in a position like you are in fantasy where they had Justin Herbert and Dobbs gets hurt or so on and so forth, the quarterback gets benched, luckily there's going to be a replacement. And, you know, I know we've got some guys on our waiver wire pickup lists who are available in a lot of leagues, and those could help out some guys going forward who are facing dilemmas like this.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, yeah, like Nick Mullins now a starter. I almost included him on the waivers list because if you're a starting quarterback for the Vikings, you're going to probably put up pretty good numbers because look at all the weapons you have surrounding you.
Yeah, and it stinks for guys like Justin Herbert, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, who loses his Iron Man streak. But at the end of the day, the Chargers are completely irrelevant at this stage. Brandon Staley, it's a matter of when, not if. They're really out of playoff contention. There's obviously a few guys there like Keenan Allen who have done well in fantasy this year, but Herbert the last few weeks has been fantasy irrelevant. Austin Eckler has a lot of fantasy players frustrated. Quentin Johnston couldn't catch a cold. So, I mean, it's interesting. But I really don't think Justin Herbert has too much of an effect on the fantasy landscape.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, he brought up a good point about with quarterbacks. If there's going to be 32 starters every week, and the guys that starts, he's going to play all the snaps unless he gets injured. There's no quarterback by committees in the NFL. As much as Saints fans want Taysom Hill to be a quarterback committee, it's just not going to happen. So, with that being said, there's always potential options in line to be replacements. So don't panic if you're in quarterback hell, but just be mindful of things, and I'm glad Great mentioned this about defenses, streaming defenses is actually we added that as a segment this week because we know for the playoffs, a lot of y'all need defenses moving forward. So we'll segue now into our listener league update, and we'll get to defenses here pretty soon, but we get this listener league update knocked out. Shout out to our guy Hank Trill, who has a bye week. Him and Mike took the byes there. And so we'll recap week 14 real quick before we break down the playoff matchups. Cameron, Bucktown Rebel Jr., unfortunately, it was too little too late for him. He had the highest total, but was already out of playoff contention. Took down Gabe there, which didn't matter for Gabe. Still made the playoffs there as a 3 seed. William punched his ticket with a big win over Uncle Big Nick, who made a second half charge, but unfortunately wasn't able to quite do enough to make the playoffs. So original Saints fan not going down without a fight. It was a rough year there, but didn't finish last. Took down Troy. So sorry, Troy. You are our cellar dweller this year there at 4-10. Hank Trill took my team down in a very close matchup. Thankfully, it did knock me out of the playoffs. I was worried it may have, but snuck in there as a 6 seed. I'll take it. The second half's been brutal to me, but my team's been picking up. I mean, 131, that was a respectable total. Yeah, I didn't win, but I had the 6th best total for the week. So, I mean, out of everyone in the league. So, not too bad. Could do better, though. So, hopefully, my team picks it up for the stretch. And then Mike punches ticket as a 2 seed, took down the Bayou Bandits there. And then shout out to Salmon. I'm on a roll. His team had been kind of up and down, but he's turned up the heat here down the stretch, was able to get into the playoffs there at 8-6. Took down our defending champion, Bucktown Rebel. Y'all, Roy. Sorry, Roy. Bucktown Rebel, defending champ, out of the playoffs, which was shocking considering how good he had been all season. But that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And we were both 7-7. I had the tiebreaker with I had more points for the season. So luckily I was able to sneak in, win the tiebreaker. So we got Salmon and William, the 5-4. I believe Williams projected to win right now. Run CMC. He's got a loaded team, but Salmon seems sneaky good. I'm on a roll. He's been able to do this, even though I'm on Ross St. Brown. His namesake's been kind of struggling lately, so that should be a good matchup. And then, the Bayou Bet Showdown. Spencer the Guru versus Gabe Henderson. My goodness, that is the script writers, they gave us a pretty fun script there, round 1 facing off. So what you think of that?
Yeah, my team's been struggling lately, so I'm not going to go in overconfident, but I'm excited. I woke up this morning, I checked all my playoff matchups, and I saw that, and I couldn't help but smile. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure, because it's one of those things to where I guess it's kind of good that we met in the playoffs, because like if we'd have met in the championship, it would have been just kind of like it would have stunk for the listeners, because like they're eligible to win the prize. So at least this guarantees that a listener will be in the championship game. And I mean, our teams haven't been that great down the stretch, so it might end up being a listener versus a listener for the championship like last season. But we'll see how it goes, man. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm feeling good about my team though. It's been turning it around a little bit lately. So Bring it on.
That's the opposite of me. I don't feel good about mine, but you never know in fantasy. It's a week-to-week thing for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah, because sometimes you think you're trending down, and then you'll have a big week where you are trending up. And so let's get to defenses. In our pre-text meeting, I usually have a text exchange. Accidentally said steamer defense instead of streamer defenses. Gabe didn't know what the hell I was talking about, but here y'all go. Top streaming options for Week 15 defenses here, and Gabe has Sean Payton's Denver Broncos going to Detroit. Seems like it could be kind of a tough spot, but you're liking them here, right? I mean, you got them on the list.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And, this isn't just necessarily for week 15. I'm anyone who picks up the Denver Broncos this week, I think can hold on to them for the rest of the playoffs. Obviously, the Broncos are trending in the right direction. They're now one game back, and that's because of their defense. Their defense has looked really good recently. It's what you'd expect out of a Sean Payton coach team. Just a gritty, tough defense. And the Lions just haven't played well. They've struggled to get anything going. It took them a long time to even get a first down against the Bears last week. And, for a month now, we've said, oh, this would be the game the Lions bounce back. This would be the game the Lions bounce back. They have to bounce back this week. And eventually you just got to hold your hands up and say, I don't know if they're a great team. They could have either peaked in the first half, or they could have been a fluke early on. I still think they'll win that division, but if you look at the defense here, the Denver Broncos, you've got to like them not only this week, but going forward as well. Over the last 3 weeks, they've got the Patriots at home, the Chargers at home, who are going to be quarterbacked by Easton Stick, and the Raiders. So, I mean, there's no better pickup when it comes to defenses than the Denver Broncos for me.
I hear you. Yeah, it's just at Detroit this week. Seems a little tricky. I'm with you, though. Those last 2 weeks seem very juicy against the Easton Stick and Aiden O'Connell. So, if anything, maybe you could pick them up and stash them. Maybe find a defense a little bit better matchup this week. But maybe the jury's out on Ben Johnson. Everyone is ordaining him in the Lions as the next innovative offense there. But maybe they've been discovered, and they're going to have to. I remember that happened with the 2018 Rams. And, greats with you on that. The fluke definitely early on for Detroit, because I remember the 2018 Rams, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl thanks to the NOLA no call. But I remember that was like Sean McVay was still fairly new to coaching, and like they pretty much had figured his offense out. And guess who the quarterback was of that offense? Jared Goff, same quarterback of these Detroit Lions. So could it be a repeat of that script where the offense crumbles? We shall see. So, yeah, and Denver's defense has been better. So I see you're thinking there. I'm going with the Chicago Bears, though, because their stretch schedule is so juicy. You get the freaking Joe Flacco-led Browns this week. Then you get the Cardinals. I know they've got Kyler Murray back, but they're nothing special. And then Atlanta, freaking Desmond Ritter, Falcons week 17, last week of fantasy. So, this Bears defense has really turned things around. They started off terrible. They were arguably the worst defense in the NFL the first 4 or 5 weeks, but they've really found themselves lately. And I think they're legit here down the stretch because they get the easy schedule. And I believe at least one of those, they're on the road this week. I mean, Cleveland's a cold weather place. And then I think they get Arizona and Atlanta at home. At least one of those at home, where the Soldier Field, we know how brutal those conditions can be. So I feel like their defense is setting up for a strong stretch run. They're available in basically every league because people don't want to trust them because of their horrible start. But the past 2 weeks, they've gotten double-digit points. And not many defenses can do that consistently. So I'm going to ride with them here for the stretch.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the Bears, Spencer. They've got one of, if not the top rush defense. Complete opposite of what I meant to say. One of the best rush defenses in the NFL. And Cleveland's strength is running the ball. I know Joe Flacco was slinging the rock around last week, but David Njoku's not going to be open 30 to 40 yards downfield every game. It's just not going to happen. And the Bears played really well. They've played really well recently. They look like a completely different team since the trade deadline. And so, yeah, I really like this pickup here.
Cool deal. So, all right, man. Well, let's see what's up next. Oh yeah, waiver wire up next, and we'll start off with you and see you get your wacko for Flacco though. Wacko for Flacco there, quarterback recommendation. Tell us why you're going with Joe this week.
Well, Spencer, anytime there's an elite quarterback available on waivers, I recommend picking him up. Joe Flacco was recently named the Browns quarterback going forward. Cleveland's still got a lot of weapons, so they just needed an experienced quarterback who doesn't even have to do much. I mean, as I mentioned, David Njoku, he's really developed a budding relationship with him. Amari Cooper is going to be back 100% soon. And the Browns just have a lot of weapons on offense, and Joe Flacco has been able to utilize those. And so I think, when it comes to waiver wire quarterbacks, especially someone who's only owned in 4% of leagues, you're going to be hard-pressed to find someone better than Joe Flacco on the waiver wires from week to week.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot there. And, the Bears have been better, but it's more against the run. Their pass defense still vulnerable. So, yeah, I could see Flacco maybe being solid. But he stole my running back, though, here. Chase Brown. I had picked him up in some leagues prior to this week. And, man, I wish I'd have started him, had him on the bench in like 2 or 3 leagues because I was like, man, he had a breakout there on that Monday night. Maybe this is legit. Then he follows it up with an even better week this week. He, Mixon's still the main guy, but he showed he's got a role in this offense.
Yeah, Chase Brown is a guy that we talked about preseason as one of the rookies that could have a big impact this season. It might have taken 13, 14 weeks, but, Spencer, this is a guy who is looking like he's now got a legitimate role to play. He was lethal on the screen passes. He's an incredibly fast, versatile running back, and it looks like the Bengals want to start to involve him more. So look out for Chase Brown. I mean, this is a guy who's now going to put up some points down the stretch.
Agreed, man. And you got Parker Washington, another late bloomer there, rookie. I believe he's a rookie there for the Jags, who's really come on here as of late. Now has a clear path for targets with Christian Kirk out.
Yeah, with Christian Kirk's injury a few weeks ago, Parker Washington had that good performance in prime time. And I think we even asked the question on the show last week, is it sustainable for him? He had another decent, not great, but decent performance at the weekend. And so I say if you're wide receiver needy, Parker Washington's a guy who's going to be available in almost 100% of leagues. He's worth a flyer given the fact that he's got a role to play going forward.
For sure. Yeah, Jags offense. Trevor Lawrence back healthy, so they're going to throw a lot. I actually have another Jags receiver for my recommendation, so stay tuned for that. And then your final one here, Gerald Everett.
Yeah, young quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks, when they come in the game, they rely on their tight ends. Gerald Everett is a guy who, he just snuck down below that 30% mark, and I'm going to take him every time. He's an experienced tight end. He put up a good performance on Sunday, and I think he'll only continue to put up decent, 8 to 10 to 12 point performances, which is exactly what you need out of a tight end. I preach it every week.
Yeah, I could see it. Rookie quarterbacks, that is a fact, and backups. Well, he's a backup. I don't think he's a rookie, but, either way, he's going to probably just go for those shorter to intermediate routes, and Everett should do good there, especially if Keenan Allen's being double teamed, or he might be out. He's banged up. I mentioned that in the headlines. And so I could see it. Hank Trill has a question for us. How do y'all feel about Demario Douglas? He's still in concussion protocol. It was his second concussion of the year. Not sure if he'll be back anytime soon. But if he is, he's a solid, I'd say, fourth receiver with potential flex upside. So to me, if you have Demario Douglas, I would just hold tight.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. This is a guy a few weeks ago who I touted as someone you should pick up. Unfortunately, he's been injured since then. But, when he played, he's shown that he can put up some points. He's a double-digit scorer in most of the games he's played recently. And so I think, yeah, as Spencer said, if you've got him, stash him, definitely.
Yeah, better than Juju, better than Devontae Parker. Parker, I believe, is hurt yet again. Yep. So Juju ended up having a decent week last week with Bailey Zappi. Bailey Zappi had 3 touchdowns. So thought about maybe including him on waivers, but I decided to go with Will Levis instead, who didn't have the greatest game last night, threw a pick 6 to start an ugly, ugly pick six. I was like, oh, here we go. Will Levis. He's about to just self-destruct. But I got to give the kid credit. He bounced back. He led the Titans to the win. And, he hadn't been that great for fantasy, but he's got some favorable matchups coming up. He's got the Texans twice, who, let's be real, still have a lot of work to do on defense. Just got shredded by Zach Wilson. And they get, I think, another interdivision game or someone. I have to look it up to be sure, but someone someone that's pretty favorable. His schedule looked pretty favorable to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to include him in the Seahawks, who aren't very good defensively. So I feel like it was worth including him because he's someone that has room for growth, and he's got a big arm. He's someone that I think is just going to continue to get better, and he's got some decent weapons too with D-Hop. So I'm going to go ahead and go with him. I know you're not a big fan of his, Gabe, but I feel like he's someone the quarterback landscape sucks. So I thought about Nick Mullins, but to me, he's got to show me a little bit of something. At least Levis has been able to hold down the starting job.
The Mayo Man. Yeah, I would definitely prefer Nick Mullins over Will Levis. I know the Texans have been really bad against bad quarterbacks this season. I think more on Sunday, it was more of a problem of they just couldn't get off the field on defense. So by the second half, they were worn out. They've had some injuries as well. I think the Titans will really kill them on the ground. Derrick Henry, it seems every week just kills, or every time he plays the Texans, rather, he kills them on the ground, goes for 100, 200 yards. So I don't see why Vrabel would stray from that strategy. But, I think Will Levis, if there's a secondary he can do damage against, it's probably the Texans.
For sure. So, yeah, there could maybe be better options, but, it's thin. Pickings are slim, so might have to go with the Mayo Man there. So, running back, got Rico Dowdle, and he's someone that's fallen through the cracks because everyone's like, well, Tony Pollard's the starter, but let's be real. Tony Pollard is not Zeke. Tony Pollard is not someone that can handle 20-something touches. He needs a compliment to help him out, and that's been Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle's been a very strong compliment. And in that offense with Dak soaring right now, the Cowboys offense arguably the best in the NFL. And I'm not sure what Joanne's saying, Cowboys, LOL. They've been no joke lately. The Cowboys have been arguably the best team in football recently. And I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'm sure they'll find a way to choke come playoff time. But for fantasy, we want numbers. And Rico Dowdle's been getting his numbers, even though he's not the starter. But we don't need him necessarily to be the starter. Pollard wasn't the starter most of the years with Zeke and was still fantasy relevant. So to me, Dowdle, if you're in need of a running back, is definitely someone to watch. And this week he gets the Bills, whose weaknesses against their weaknesses against the run.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head when you said, I think Pollard, Dowdle has the Pollard role from last year. And he's just a good complementary back who comes in and gets touches. And let's be honest, the Cowboys offense moves the ball, and that results in points. And, behind that offensive line, anything is possible for Dowdle. For
sure. Yeah, you just want as many pieces tied to elite offenses as possible, I feel like. So, yeah, I would go ahead and scoop him up there. And I got Zay Jones here, the Jaguars still pretty solid on offense. Trevor Lawrence was able to play through the ankle injury, and even though he didn't do much with the amount of targets he got, Zay Jones got 11 targets last week, y'all. He didn't put up flashy numbers, but the bottom line is that with Christian Kirk out, Trevor Lawrence is going to lean heavily on Zay Jones because Calvin Ridley is not the most reliable. Yeah, he's a field stretcher, but when it comes to the intermediate stuff, I don't think you really trust Calvin Ridley. The guys he was leaning on last week were Zay Jones and Evan Ingram. Ingram ended up with the gaudy stats, but there's going to be a week where I feel like Jones breaks out. So I'd go ahead and get him here. He's only rostered in 27% of leagues. Gabe likes Parker Washington, and I do too in the right matchup. But I feel like if you're looking for someone with a little more of a stable floor week to week, I feel like Zay Jones is a guy that you might be able to just set it and forget it with him. I know he hadn't really put up the numbers yet, but if he can start getting a few more downfield looks, catch a touchdown or two, the volume's there, and that's what we want in fantasy.
You could give me J.J. Arcega-Whiteside And any receiver that has 11, that gets 11 targets in a game, I would pick him up in fantasy. I mean, it's just the numbers are there. I don't think those will decrease too drastically with Christian Kirk out. And Christian Kirk was the volume guy. And I think Zay Jones slots right into that position. He's got to make those catches. He's got to make some more big plays, get that yak up. But, I think he's definitely worth a flyer.
Yeah, because he's definitely left a lot of meat on the bone, because he's someone that Lawrence he must do well in practice, but then come the game, he probably seems to kind of struggle. But hopefully he can start taking advantage of those opportunities moving forward. And speaking of opportunities, Luke Musgrave's on IR, so the other Packers rookie tight end is taking advantage. Tucker Kraft, y'all. Tucker Kraft has really turned up the heat recently, and he's someone that's become a streaming option weekly. I feel like he's got a pretty good matchup this week, I believe, and it's just someone that's continued to get a consistent amount of targets. He's just someone that's there. And Jordan Love, that's one thing with Jordan Love, he spreads the ball, so they've got multiple options that can do well. Yeah, the Bucks this week, who suck against the pass. So I'm thinking that Tucker Kraft's going to continue his good run of success, and Musgrave likely out for the season, so he'll just continue to get more and more reps and continue to build trust with Jordan Love. So I feel like he's a very solid pickup.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jordan Love has spread the ball out a lot, but he has shown love to tight ends. And with Luke Musgrave out, Tucker Kraft's got a huge opportunity, especially against a defense who, last I checked, was rated 31st in the NFL in passing yards allowed. So there's definitely an opportunity there. Yeah.
Yep. So even if he's only 2% rostered, so get him as your second tight end, and then maybe if he keeps trending up, he might end up being a starter, because it's hard to find 12 reliable tight ends these days. So those are our waiver wire pickups. Do with that what you will. If you need some upgrades to your team come playoff time, make sure to keep these names in mind. So before we get to our Q&A segment to close out the show, we're going to get to our best flex for week 15. I nailed my best flex last week. Drake London, huge game, took advantage of that soft matchup against the Bucks. I'm going to go with Zay Flowers this week. He gets a pretty soft matchup there against the Jaguars, and it just continued to be more involved in the Ravens offense. Mark Andrews is gone now, so Lamar Jackson has no choice but to lean on the emerging rookie there, Zay Flowers. Glad I got a lot of shares of him in leagues that I'm hoping to take championships in, because I see him continuing to roll, and this week, favorable matchup, I see him getting double digits once again.
Yeah, for sure. Zay Flowers is a guy who's broken out, perhaps been one of the three best rookie wide receivers for sure, along with Puka Nacua and Tank Dell. He's just emerged to a must play if you've got him. And I think putting him in your flex here as you have him is a great play.
Yeah, because you can make a case he's a WR2 at this point, but he's still a flex for most people. So just continue to flexing your muscle there with Zay Flowers. He's killing it. So I see you got a Ken Walker there, he's back now, but gets yet another tough matchup. Had the Niners last week, Eagles this week, but you're riding with K-Dubs this week.
Yeah, the Eagles defense has been really disappointing. I know they're great against the run, but if you look at Kenneth Walker, this is a dude who's persistent. Early in the season, he had 17 carries against the Lions, 18 against the Panthers. And while he didn't go for many yards against the Lions, he racked up the touchdowns. He hasn't had a touchdown, and I know he's been out a few weeks. He hasn't had a touchdown in 6 weeks, Spencer. I think he's due. I think Kenneth Walker, once he's at full strength, can really run hard and break a lot of tackles, and I think he could do that against the Eagles. I think this is going to be one of those ugly run the ball down your throat games for both of those teams in prime time, with both needing a win, and I think Kenneth Walker could nab a few scores.
Yeah, I could see it, being that I like him as a flex. RB2, yeah. I'd be like, maybe, I wouldn't feel great about it, but as a flex, I'm like, yeah, sure, because he's someone that's going to get volume, and he's healthier now. So, and all he needs is a touchdown or two, and boom, that's more than enough to be a good flex play. So,
and he got receiving work last week, which was nice.
Yeah, that's true. Because I feel like with him, it's one of those things like He's I think he's just going to continue to. Well, now that he's healthy, he'll continue to get better. And I know last week he had DeAndre Swift, who like just didn't. He just seems like he's kind of fallen off. But I feel like going back to the well at running back is smart here because Ken Walker is someone that I feel like it's the real deal as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift last week was really disappointing just because the Eagles found themselves down so early. They just couldn't get anything going on offense. They've completely abandoned the run, it seems, and that's really hurt them. It really has.
Yeah, that was funny Sunday night. I was really tired, from covering the Saints that day. I was just like, I have a feeling this is going to be a blowout in favor of Dallas. I'm going to take a nap. And then I take a nap, wake up, it's like end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, somewhere in there. Sure enough, Cowboys are up by 20. I'm like, called that.
Yeah, well, I mean, for anyone who actually stayed up and watched it, DeAndre Swift got some carries early, and he looked pretty good. He was getting these little chunk plays, not anything great. He wasn't breaking off 20-yard runs, but what you'd expect against the Dallas defense for a good running back. He was picking up 5-6 yards. Just really good. And then they just completely abandoned the run. Jalen Hurts fumbled, and it was downhill from there for the running game. And they just dug themselves too big a hole to come back from. And it really hurt DeAndre Swift fantasy-wise.
Right. Yeah, a lot of fumbles, too, from what I heard.
Fumbles team.
Yep. So Eagles, I think when it comes back, circled back around to the playoffs, I still think I'd prefer them over the Cowboys, but I don't see either one getting past the 49ers. Let's be real.
I agree.
So, all right, y'all, last call, Fantasy Roundup Q&A, last call. I know a lot of trade deadlines have passed. Any start, sits, or waiver wire questions you may have, get them in now, y'all. Get them in now. Comment questions about trade, starts, the waiver wire, anything else you might have fantasy football related. Get these questions in right now before we sign off because we don't have too much time left here on the Fantasy Roundup. So doesn't look like we have any at the moment. If y'all have any, get them in now. But we'll give our final thoughts before, so in case we don't get any, we can just go. My final thought here is just stay the course, y'all, for the playoffs. Don't do anything too crazy. Just kind of keep doing what you've been doing. Maybe for the flex play, try something a little different, like Chase Brown if you're feeling spicy. It was 2 flex leagues. I got a few where I put him in because it's just like, why not? If it's between him and Kenneth Gainwell, it's like I feel like he's got a lot more upside. So if you're in that boat where your bench is just kind of meh, I would swing for the fences and try an upside flex. But for most leagues, just your 10, 12-man regular leagues, just stay the course. Don't do anything too cute and just hope your studs perform. So with that being said, good luck to everyone in the playoffs this week.
Damn it, Spencer, you took my final thought. I was just going to tell everyone good luck. Good luck in the fantasy playoffs this week to all those who are in there, as Spencer said, stay the course. Really, those guys have gotten you there for a reason. So keep them there. And if you're going to try and make a home run play, make it in your flex position.
For sure. So we're on the same page there. I guess y'all are good to go. Then we don't have many questions today. So I guess everyone that made it knows what they're doing. So good for y'all. Well, once again, good luck. We'll be back next week at the usual time. I actually might have a different time next week because of Bayou Bets and us taking vacation days. The schedule is going to be a little different coming up, but we'll definitely be back though to get you all right for the fantasy football playoff stretch run. So for Gabe Henderson, this is Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Roundup. See y'all later. Peace.